On March 22, 2018, a hysterical and bloodied 20-year-old Ezra McCandless frantically banged on the front door of dairy farmer Don Sippel's home in a remote area of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. When Don answered the door, he found a barefooted and muddy Ezra begging for a doctor. The word "boy" had been cut into her arm. Her clothing had been torn, and she couldn't remember her name. Don let Ezra in and consoled her while the two waited for the police. What Don and the police didn't know at the time was that Ezra was a cold-blooded killer. Details of the attack recounted by McCandless were initially hazy. But eventually, she said it was ex-boyfriend Alex Woodworth who attacked her. The police believed they were looking for the perpetrator of a violent attack on McCandless. But that all changed when they found Woodworth's body on a desolate dirt road near the farmhouse. WHO was Ezra McCandless. Originally Monica Kay, was born on October 6, 1998, to 14-year-old Rosalena Gunnelson in Stanley, Wisconsin. Her biological father was not a part of her life, but her mother's partner, Josh Carlin, legally adopted Ezra when she was 4 years old, even though her mum and dad divorced when Ezra was 12 years old. She continued to have a close relationship with her father. Once Ezra hit high school, she struggled with her identity. She experimented with he, him pronouns and legally changed her name from Monica Kay to Ezra McCandless. Ezra's friends described her as a free-spirited amateur artist who had dropped out of college and moved to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, to focus on her love for art. Ezra enjoyed the attention and loved to stand out. She even used her car as a blank canvas to showcase her artwork. Jason Mengel. In 2017, 19-year-old Ezra met 33-year-old Jason Mengel, a medic in the Army Reserve. Though they had a wide age gap, Jason said it worked well. He said he kept Ezra energized, and she made him more spontaneous. Jason said Ezra was full of surprises. From changing her name to breaking into abandoned buildings to take photos. They were together for just 8 months. But things progressed quickly. They moved in together and talked about marriage. Jason said they used to play around with calling each other husband and wife. Ezra described their relationship as an ancient love so powerful that it scared them both. But all of that changed when they met Alex Woodworth. Meeting Alex Woodworth, Ezra and Jason would often hang out at a local coffee shop called Racy Delene's. It was there the two made friends with Alex, who worked as a barista. Alex was not your typical 24-year-old. He had a Bachelor of Science from UW-Eau Claire with a major in philosophy and a minor in biology. He'd started applying to graduate schools to fulfill his lifelong dream of obtaining his PhD and becoming a professor of philosophy. Jason, Ezra, and Alex became fast friends. When Ezra met Alex, she was through some complicated things. In October 2017, she found out she was pregnant with Jason's baby. She knew she wasn't ready for a child, so she'd had an abortion. She was experiencing a lot of guilt, trauma, and feeling very isolated. Jason said it took a toll on their relationship, and he knew Alex would be a great support person for Ezra during this time. So he encouraged them to spend more time together. Of their relationship, Jason said, "She was going through emotional things. He was a really good friend. I kind of pushed them together at one time because I knew they both had similar viewpoints. He had some things in his life that I figured she could help him with. And I thought that he could help her with things in her life." The affair. Having found a kindred spirit who she could trust and rely on. as well as finding Alex's theories on philosophy fascinating. One thing led to another, and the two began a secret sexual affair behind Jason's back. But that wasn't enough for Ezra. Jason went away for 2 weeks to work with the National Guard. Before he left, Jason asked his friend John Hanson to look after Ezra. While he was gone, Ezra started another sexual relationship, but this time with Jason's friend John. One night once Jason returned, after Ezra had fallen asleep, he began looking through her phone. He found text messages between Ezra and John and her and Alex, which showed evidence of both relationships. Jason decided to confront Ezra and Alex. Devastated that his friend would betray him like that, Alex apologetically admitted the truth. Ezra told Jason that her relationship with John was not consensual and that he had sexually assaulted her at a party. According to Ezra, she was drunk and passed out at the time and couldn't remember the details. Jason immediately went to the police to file a police report. When police interviewed Ezra, she told him the same story. During the interview, she has her knees up by her chest and looks frightened and defenseless. Police found her to be very believable as a victim of sexual assault. But when police investigated the accusation, they discovered the text messages Ezra had sent Jason's friend and began to doubt her version of events. Police then interviewed Alex in connection with Ezra. When they spoke with him, he said Ezra had confided in him that the encounter with John had been consensual, but she regretted it after the fact. The case was ultimately dropped. Ezra's breaking point. At this point, relationships with both men ended. Some sources say she ended it with both of them. Others say Jason ended it, and then she ended it with Alex. But whatever scenario, in a mere matter of months, Ezra had gone from juggling 3 men to being completely alone. Ezra moved out of her shared apartment with Jason in Eau Claire and back home to Stanley to live with her family. Ezra felt like her life was crumbling down around her. She blamed Alex for her and Jason's breakup, and she was desperate to regain some control. In February 2018, Ezra texted Alex saying she never wanted to speak to him again, and Alex respected her wishes. He never contacted her again after that. Jason says she spent this time trying desperately to win him back, but he refused and said he didn't want to get back together, which made Ezra furious. Jason claimed Ezra was manipulative and had taken advantage of all 3 men in the situation. But despite this, the two still stayed in touch and kept speaking regularly. Ezra sent Jason journals in which she expressed her upset at having betrayed him. Strange behavior. At around 10:30 a.m. on March 22, 2018, hours before Alex Woodworth was killed, Ezra surprised Jason by turning up unexpectedly at Racy's coffee shop to see him. She'd driven to Eau Claire from Stanley even though her dad had told her not to drive and hid her car keys. Ezra is seen on the coffee shop security footage, and Jason said she seemed visibly agitated and acting out of character. The server told police Ezra did not look like her usual self. She looked disheveled and wasn't wearing makeup, which was not normal for her. Ezra and Jason had messaged each other 600 times the night before. She said she was back in town and planned to go back to Alex's house to return some items to him. According to Jason, she said she wanted to share some of her writings with Alex. Her journal entries expressed that she felt like she'd been assaulted, and she just wanted to get her voice back. Jason said she told him she was taking back her life and becoming Ezra again. Once Ezra left Racy's to go to Alex's house, Jason became increasingly concerned. He said Ezra left with rage in her eyes. And he had a gut feeling that something was wrong. He knew Ezra and Alex hadn't spoken for weeks. So he thought it was incredibly off that she would show up unexpectedly to go and visit him. He decided to follow her and bicycle over to Alex's house. When he arrived, Jason spotted her 2003 Chevy Impala outside. The car's engine still running, music still playing, and the driver's side door still open. He paced back and forth outside the house for 45 minutes before finally deciding to go inside. Without knocking. Once inside, he said he found Alex and Ezra in the middle of a conversation. He said you could taste the tension in the room and both of their faces were like masks. He said he could tell something was going on. But they were both pretending everything was fine. Jason told him that they should talk in a public place. And they agreed. Three went outside and were met by a police cruiser. A passerby had seen Jason pacing outside the house and called the police. Dashcam footage shows the police talking to Alex. Ezra is in the driver's seat but is not visible on camera. Jason is out of the shot on his bicycle. But he explains to the officer why he's concerned. He said, "She gave me a vibe today, man. I don't know. It doesn't feel right. Something feels wrong." The officer spoke to Ezra and Alex. And they assured him everything's fine. Ezra even apologized to the officer for causing a fuss. Then the officer says, "I'd rather come here and check. And it be nothing than have something bad happen," which is quite eerie given what happened next. Ultimately, the officer sees nothing of concern, gets in his cruiser, and leaves. Jason wheeled his bike over to Ezra's car, where she's sitting in the driver's seat, and Alex climbed into the passenger seat. He had a quick chat with Alex before they drove away. The murder. Just over 3 hours later, Ezra showed up at Don Sippel's farm. While being treated in hospital, Ezra said the last thing she remembered was feeling afraid of Alex. Even though she claimed not to remember any details or even her name. When police asked if there was anyone they could call, she immediately started asking for Jason Mengel. When Ezra was examined, along with her torn and cut clothes, she was found to have 3 superficial cuts to her palm, scratches on her forearm where the word "boy" had been cut, a couple of scratches on her thigh, some scrapes near her underwear, and a few shallow scratches on her jaw that were gone a couple of days later. When hospital staff asked her how she sustained her injuries, particularly carving the word "boy," Ezra claimed that Alex did it. But hospital staff were concerned and confused because they found the injuries appeared to be self-inflicted. Police began the hunt for Alex, who was nowhere to be found. After reaching out to Alex's family and friends and finding no one could locate him, they decided to return to Don Sippel's farm to search. While searching the farm, they drove past a muddy road where they could spot footprints from the top of the hill leading to the main road. They made their way to the top of the hill, and using binoculars, they spotted Ezra's car in the distance, stuck in the mud with a human body hanging out of the back seat. When they reach the scene, they confirm it to be the body of 24-year-old Alex Woodworth. It was a brutal scene and showed signs of a horrific attack. Alex had been stabbed 16 times in the head, neck, and groin. At this point, the police go back to Ezra and confirm that they'd found the crime scene. That's when she claims details started to come back to her. She admitted to stabbing Alex but said it was in self-defense. She said Alex grabbed her arm and started to carve the word "boy" into it. Ezra said Alex used to like calling her boy, to tease her about how she experimented with different pronouns, even though she doesn't identify that way anymore. But this story doesn't check out because Alex would have had to reach across himself and carve it upside down to do it. When questioned by police on this, Ezra admitted that Alex didn't actually inflict the injury, and she had instead done it to herself. When asked why she did it, Ezra had no answer. Ezra continued her story, claiming that the two ended up in the back seat where Alex began attacking her, cutting her clothes open to trying to sexually assault her. She said she was terrified for her life, didn't know what to do, and grabbed the knife by its jagged blade, wrenched it away from Alex, and began stabbing him in self-defense. But Ezra's hands only have superficial cuts and scrapes, which do not match her version of events. If she'd grabbed the knife by the blade, her hand would have been flayed open. As the police began to examine more and more evidence, they became convinced that Ezra was lying. Ezra claims she began stabbing Alex inside the car, but the blood evidence shows that Alex was stabbed mostly outside the vehicle with more blood loss. Also, Alex had virtually no defensive wounds, suggesting that Ezra took him by surprise, stabbing him first in the back of the head. The police believe the attack began outside the car and that by the time Alex got into the car, he was nearly dead. The trial. Aftermath. 2 weeks after Alex Woodworth is killed, Ezra is arrested and charged with first-degree intentional homicide. The trial began on October 15, 2019, at the Dunn County Judicial Center. The defense painted a picture of Ezra being the victim of a cold and calculating Alex obsessed with Ezra. They said he would manipulate and pressure her into sexual acts that she didn't feel comfortable doing. When interviewed in the hospital, Ezra had said she grabbed the knife from Alex by the blade. But at trial, her story changes. She said she kneed him in the groin, which caused him to drop the knife. She said she grabbed it and started stabbing him, anywhere and everywhere she could. She said she wasn't trying to kill him. She just wanted to get away and get out of the car. The defense claims she went into shock after realizing that she'd just killed one of her best friends and blacked out the memory. And that's when she cut her arm with the word, boy. But Ezra's story was full of holes, and law enforcement did not believe it for a second. When the prosecution put forth their version of events, Jason Mengel took the stand. Ezra had not seen her ex-boyfriend for 1.5 years, and her face lit up when she saw him enter the courtroom. Many pointed out Ezra's bizarre demeanor during the trial. She was criticized for being too calm, smiling too much, and making too many jokes. At one point, Jason stated, when she was on the witness stand, it didn't seem real. She just seemed at times to be enjoying it. In a weird move, the day that Jason Mengel testified for the prosecution, Ezra was wearing a pink blazer which she removed to show a green cardigan that Jason had bought her. Like she was sending a message. It was evident that she still held a torch for Jason. The prosecution said that Ezra herself had told police who turned up when she was at Alex's house that she did not feel threatened or in danger with either Jason or Alex. The prosecution also said that the crime scene did not show signs of the struggle Ezra claimed happened. They said Ezra had planned the attack because she'd brought a knife that she'd taken from her dad's place a few days before the murder and then went to visit Alex intending to kill him. According to their theory, Ezra's car became stuck in the mud. The two got out of the vehicle to inspect the situation. And while Alex had his back turned, Ezra attacked him from behind with the knife she had stolen from her father's house. The prosecution believes that because Alex was found hanging out of the backseat of the car, that he either tried to climb back in to escape Ezra and died trying, or that she attempted to drag him out herself so she could drive away. But when that didn't work, she had to come up with a different plan. Once Alex, who had suffered 16 stab wounds to his head, neck, groin, and torso, was dead, Ezra spent hours rearranging the evidence to make it look like her version of events was accurate. What's possibly most disturbing is that Alex was found with a scarf around his neck which police believe he used to try and stop the bleeding. On top of that, none of Alex's wounds were fatal in and of themselves, meaning that if he had received medical attention in time, he might have survived. Had Alex been able to call for help, he might still be alive. But Ezra took Alex's phone and smashed it, preventing him from being able to contact anyone for help. Ezra claims she took Alex's phone because she didn't have a phone of her own and that she accidentally broke it when she fell. But investigators felt that Ezra's intention and motive were clear. Ezra still harbored deep feelings of love for Jason, and she felt that with Alex entirely out of the picture, she would have another chance with him. Prosecutors believed Ezra had deliberately driven Alex to a remote area with the intention to brutally murder him. Ezra showed no remorse during the trial. In fact, she seemed to be enjoying herself much of the time. And after deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury returned a guilty verdict of first-degree intentional homicide. When asked why they reached the verdict they did, one juror said the clincher was that Ezra had stabbed Alex in the back of the head first, which is a very intentional act. During sentencing, Ezra delivered a tearful apology to the family of Alex Woodworth, but many found it insincere, and the judge made a point of saying so. Ezra was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 50 years. Today, she's selling artwork on Instagram to fund her appeal. Her mother runs the account. Sources